Good evening, everyone. Today is Monday, April 23rd. We are being recording live at 6 o'clock from the Hobby Hearing Room. Ms. Hames, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Fabiano?
Here.
Mr. Martucci?
Yep.
Ms. Powell? Here. Ms. Swope? Here. Mr. Vecchia?
Present.
Mr. Perrin?
Here.
Mr. Capabianco?
Here. President Vecchia, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any public comment this evening?
Hello, Tandy Sakuni from Precinct 2. I'm just here to speak on behalf of my husband and I. He can't be present because he's at a lacrosse game, but I wanted to start off by saying that I just wanted to thank all of the school committee members for working diligently to help us get on the field for our second home game for Winthrop Youth Lacrosse. It meant a lot. I received a lot of positive feedback from our parents that they were so happy with the way the field looks. A lot of them have younger kids and they've had no reasons to be at the fields, but it was their first time. Everything went smoothly, and so I just wanted to just thank all of you. My second thing is that even though that we were able to get on that field, ongoing, it's going to cost a little too much for us to be able to afford to utilize the fields for our last two home games at the fee rate that we are currently set at for a nonprofit organization. Unfortunately, when we opened up our signups last fall. So we set our rate at an amount, assuming it was going to be set at the same amount for using Middle Fields. There are costs that are associated with our program that we have to pay all our referees. Obviously, we have to pay for the fields, and we pay for all of our equipment, and we also have to pay to register all of our town teams with the league. So we have insurance for our town, and that's the insurance that we provided to the town of Winthrop to utilize your fields. So with that, we set our rates and leave a little bit of a cushion. We did not bill our, I guess we didn't set the fee at an appropriate amount in order to cover these excessive charges that we did not plan for. And I'm just looking to see if there is any sort of relief that we could possibly have, because I don't want to have to go back to our parents at this point and ask them for more money for the next 2 weeks. And I also don't want to take us out on the road and have to find another place. And it's going to be very difficult for us to find a 4 to 6 hour time frame for our Sunday games. There are places that can do it at a more reasonable price, but we would have to break it up over a couple of days. So I just ask that maybe there's some sort of consideration out there that we could possibly lower the fees of some sort, even if it's just to pay for site administration and custodians, and then just lower that $400 user fee of some sort. Because I think I paid $840 yesterday. And then I think I paid $400 to use it on the Saturday. So we still have another 2 select games that I would love to do at home. And then we have another 2 days, May 6th and May 20th, that we would have our home games for a 6 hour time frame there. Unfortunately, our U9s were not able to play there yesterday just because we didn't have enough of the players present because of school vacation. So I was able to reach out to Patty in enough time to cancel that last hour. But I'm just here just to say thank you and to hope that the committee would consider just lowering that fee of $400 to something a little bit more affordable for our program. Thank you.
Can we have any discussion on this?
Just if I can, as you can see, this is a learning curve.
No,
You're the
I
first folks there, and we rushed to get you guys in there.
Yeah.
Perhaps maybe, your board could send us a number that you're comfortable, and we'll have a discussion, and I guess see what we could do.
Okay.
So,
My feeling on it is the number's high, and it is eye-popping when you first see it, and even when we went over it, you look at it, you're like, wow. And lacrosse is the first group that wasn't, and they weren't able to be ready for this number. Is there any way that we could waive the fees for these next 2 games? Because we already collected 1,200 from them, 600 for us, 600 for the site administrator and the custodian. Just waive the $400 of the next 2 weekends, only because, not to set a precedent, but only because they weren't able to be prepared for this number, and not to go into the future at any other youth sports. Send our fee schedule to every youth sport that might rent it going forward, but give them the opportunity to set up their season and charge the right price. Where they weren't really given that opportunity, I think it's appropriate, maybe we could waive the fee for the next 2 weeks of just the $400. And where we've already collected 600 off them, and that wasn't putting that to our budget anyways, because we weren't expecting to collect any money this year. So I'd like to make a motion that we waive the $400 for the next 2 weekends, and let it be known that we're not setting a precedent going forward. Every youth organization is gonna know the fee schedule from this point on, set up, your costs accordingly. So I'll make a motion to waive the fees for the $400 fees for the next 2
We have a
weekends.
motion by Mr. Fabiano, a second by Ms. Swope. Any further discussion?
Yes, when are the next games?
May 6th, May 20th for our hometown games. And then we have 2 select games that I did not put in yet on the permit just because when I originally worked out the numbers with Patty, I was overwhelmed at how much the number was and didn't think I could even afford to have like 2 more select games there. So I need to be able to pull that permit still, so I don't recall what those are, but they're coming up in the next 4 weeks. There's 2 more games.
Okay, so your next game happens before our next meeting,
Yes, but I already pulled a permit for it.
and you've already paid for that.
Right, we already
Well,
approved it.
I pulled a permit for all of our home games and was
Okay.
approved for it. What I paid for was this past weekend,
Right,
so I paid $1,240 to the town for the Saturday and Sunday.
okay, so we're talking about the fees that would happen for the next game that happens before we meet. So if we don't make this decision tonight,
Yeah,
Oh, correct. I don't
then
have
you
to
would
pay.
be on, that's what I'm saying, we don't have,
yeah. In according to the motion, the facilities manager, they still have to pay that fee and the custodial fee,
okay.
just not the rental.
So would this apply to all of the games that they're gonna be playing, even the ones that they haven't pulled permits for yet?
No, just the games they pulled permits for this season.
But then you have 2 that you haven't done, you said you haven't done
Right,
yet.
but, I mean,
The select is a different situation than
Yeah.
on the Sundays.
right, yeah, the
Um,
Sundays are a little bit more difficult for us because we have 4 teams that are playing against another town, so they have to bring all of their teams, and it's very hard to relocate and replan and reschedule somewhere else. Where if it's just we only have 1 select team, it's very easy for me to relocate them outside of Winthrop
Okay,
at a more affordable. We want to play here, and I want this to happen, so I mean, we'll pay whatever we need to pay, but it's very difficult for me to take a big chunk of teams and relocate them somewhere else. So if you could waive any sort of charges for those long days that we're on that field, that would be greatly appreciated, just because we didn't ever appropriate for this.
okay.
Can I ask, how much are you short, just on these 2 games?
Well, we would actually have to ask all of our families to come up with like another $40 to play for our home games in order to cover our charges.
Are you guys registered as a nonprofit?
We are technically not registered as a nonprofit yet. We have all of our books and we could show them to you. I mean, we don't take any of the money.
No, I'm just
Everything's done
asking
for free,
because
but
most of the other
have done
organizations
that,
are.
yeah. So what we did was, we actually got information from Dean Dolores, who just did it for Riptide, the AAU basketball team, and asked him, because when we were quoted like a year or 2 ago, they wanted like $1,000 to $2,000. And we just started up, and we don't have an extra $1,000 or $2,000. We don't ask for a lot. We ask just for enough to cover our charges.
Who's asking for 2,000, the Secretary of State?
That's what they had asked for. When we had originally asked for information on the nonprofit,
Maybe.
but then Dean Galore said that he gave me the website that he did, and he was able to receive it in like 3 to 4 weeks, and he paid like $800 to do the registration, which is still another $800 that I have to pull out of the program. But it's not, we charge $195, but it's also not a cheap sport for parents. They have to buy all of the equipment. The equipment's not cheap. So it's hard for us to go and put more of a burden on our parents to be raising the fees when they already have to pay for helmets and gloves and shoulder pads and sticks and unfortunately, we opened enrollment in the fall for the spring, so we're now in this predicament.
Mr. Matucci, do you have a comment?
I totally understand the predicament, but the only thing is, I would not be in favor of waiving the entire fee. Maybe like a 50%. It's just like, I know it's, it's the first time out, and it's, it's new, but I would think that if we waived it completely, that may set a precedent.
Yeah.
I think we need to just reduce it if that would help. So I would be in favor of a 50% reduction.
My only, I mean, I have no problem with it. Like I said, this is a learning curve for us. So, my fear is just, next season, Winthrop Youth Soccer comes to us and says,
Well, I would hope that at some point,
Or
the
whatever.
pro forma is
Yeah.
put together, and you can see what your expenses are, and you can see what
Exactly.
revenue you need to bring in to cover that, like.
Eventually, but like I said, you guys are literally the first
But I know, but we're
program
the
and we
guinea
rushed
pigs,
to get
and we're
you.
starting out. I totally understand that, and I get that. I know that Winthrop Youth Football is going to be opening up registration soon. They're also gonna have to look at this number. They're also gonna have to consider what they're going to be charging parents for registration for soccer, for football, and cheerleading as well, to be able to cover the cost when they rent it out for, I think they have like 4 or 5 home games. So unfortunately, we just didn't know what the price was going to be. So we're just in this predicament.
So we have a motion on the table by Mr. Fabiano, a seconded by Ms. Swope to.
I'm sorry, I have another question.
oh.
Lisa, do you have any comment on how this would affect the budget, or if it
So in terms of commentary on youth lacrosse, Winthrop Youth Lacrosse, I'm going to recuse myself from commenting anything related to the fee or the waiver of the fee because I have a child on the team.
Yep.
So I'll recuse myself from that thought. But in terms of the field itself, as Tino said, there are certainly expenses that go along with maintaining this field over we can't think from the perspective of one season to the next. We have to think long-term of the equipment that we have, everything from the turf to the stands, which are metal, which don't, not going to be replaced within the next 7 years. The field itself, the turf field, will be. We have to look at budgeting between now and the next 10 years for that whole entire field. It's a learning curve for us. The rates were set initially based on a look at about 12 different communities and then narrowed it down to some like communities and to see what they were charging. It's not always apples to apples because the way some schools use it is either the school owns and manages the whole field, or it's a combination of the school and the town, like Parks and Rec. In our case, it's just the school alone. So again, it's not apples to apples in terms of comparison, and then sat down with the subcommittee, the athletic subcommittee and the building and ground subcommittee. We looked at those fee structures and the manual and talked an awful lot about how we don't want to price out our own Winthrop Youth sports. That's not the goal, because the goal is for Winthrop Youth Athletics to play on that field, to encourage them to continue to go to school here and continue a middle school and high school experience on that field. So we, during that time, took a look at the original thought for the rental portion of the field, and Mr. Fabiano was on that committee, and we cut that down to a half-day rate and a full-day rate, which is much different than an hourly rate. So, and it is less. But certainly, good points are made in terms of the cost of the field, and our goal has never been to out-cost and make, but you compare it to Field in Revere, Rumney Marsh, I believe, is about $25 a rental, correct?
An hour.
$25 an hour to rent Rumney Marsh. Now, I'm not gonna lie, comparatively, our field blows that field away in terms of, it's brand new, and however, they're a city and we're a town, although they're, less than a few miles away from us. So their funding sources are very different in terms of upkeep of that field and management moving forward, where ours right now is just the school department covering the cost of it.
So Mr. Fabiano did make a motion that was seconded by Ms. Swope that would reduce 100% of the fees for the remainder of the season of the games that they requested. Ms. Hames, will you please call the roll on that
No,
motion?
two, the next two, is that right?
The next two, that's what they,
Next two.
yeah,
We're
that's
talking
what
a
they
total of
apply.
how much money here?
$800.
That's $800.
$800.
Those are the games that they hold for.
Right. Not for the select team. If
Yep.
they decide to do the select, they
Just the
know
two
the
games
cost
they
and they have to make that decision.
Call the roll on that?
Mr. Fabiano?
Yes.
Mr. Matucci?
No.
Ms. Powell?
Yes.
Ms. Swope?
Yes.
Mr. Vecchia?
Yes.
Mr. Perrin?
Yes.
Mr. Capabianco?
Yes. All right. Do we have any further public comment?
Yes, hi, Stacy McKenzie, I'm a resident of 15 Emerson Road. I was at a PTO meeting the Thursday before school vacation. Ms. Swope was there, Mr. Fabiano was there, talking to the group about possibly eliminating the Viking buses, which lots of us rely heavily on that, working out of town, working parents, and trying to get out of town very early before the traffic. So we do rely heavily on that. I'm not sure where we're at with that, but we wanted to kind of just bring it up here now. I don't know if you're going to address it later in the meeting, but that's something we can talk about, and we have some parents that are concerned as well. So
When we addressed it, it wasn't possibly, it was already eliminated. We had already made that decision. Whether we can have the conversation, I don't know where you want to go with it, but when we addressed it and explained it at the meetings, it was understood that it was canceled. It wasn't possible, it wasn't a decision that we're coming up with, it was a decision we had already made, just so to make
is
sure
that
it's
something
clear.
we can bring back up for conversation, something we can address, look at again? A lot of us, like I said, rely heavily on it. I know like you have issues as well, like today, you just didn't show up. So I know you're up against that as well. I'm willing to take those days that they just don't show up because of work, you have to get out of town.
For me personally, it was all about cost. Whatever increase we were gonna have, whatever that number was, I didn't feel comfortable having to possibly lay off teachers to increase the cost in the buses.
How much more of a cost would it be? I know, so there was a few years it was free.
Right, and it wasn't actually free, it was covered by the override money, the debt exclusion money. They paid for it, so it wasn't free, it was paid for, but just by a different source.
Parents didn't kind of have to come up with
Didn't
money.
have to pay for it then. How many buses we would need, we don't know for a fact. It could be anywhere from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 buses. It's all a matter of how many of those students were to sign up, because we, at this point, we're not compliant with the law. It's a number that, we don't know the exact number, we know it will be a large number, and
What if we based it off of the last 5 years, the numbers that came from the past 5 years?
But I don't think you can do that because you need to look at how many people now would be entitled to it with free and reduced lunch. Is that correct?
So there are.
So we would know who would join up. But right now, you have a known universe of people that would use it, but you don't know who would then partake if it was a free of charge.
So there was a time where, well, I say free, but like Jimmy said, it was paid by someone else.
Right.
To me, it was free. I didn't have to go up with the money right away. So was there a big influx of people using that bus then?
we maxed it out,
We went to 2 buses,
and they were maxed.
and they were at max.
So
How many
Yeah.
buses, how many people fit, how many kids can fit in a bus?
71 students according to Vinnie.
And you had 2 buses.
And then they cut the bus service off, is that correct? I wasn't here at that time?
Yeah,
It was just during the transition.
Yeah.
Right.
So you wouldn't be able to just say to people at a certain point moving forward, if there was a fee for the bus service, there are 420 students in kindergarten through 6th grade that qualify for free and reduced lunch. So if you have the bus service optional for people to pay, any one of those 420 students who would like to ride the bus, they qualify for free and reduced lunch, and the law is very clear that they do not have to pay, as long as the school department is subsidizing the whole cost of transportation. So our school department's budget this year, approximately, and I'm going off the top of my head, so these aren't exact figures, but the approximate cost from the school department's budget to cover the fee-for-service transportation that the kids are riding now is about $60,000 out of the school's budget alone. The parents each pay $175 for the year, and so for all the students that are riding the bus, that $175 per year times about 100 kids, about 17,000, on top of the 60 that the school district supports comes out to about, obviously, you can do the math, so, but because the school department's budget pays any portion of the total cost for that particular service, that service should be free to any student who's on free and reduced lunch. If the school department wasn't paying any money towards that service, so the parents paying for the service covered the entire cost, and the school department's budget wasn't paying anything towards that, there's a possibility that free and reduced lunch students would not have to pay. But the second the school department puts any money towards that total cost, you have to, by law, open it up to all the free and reduced students for free. So there are a total of 700, I actually brought it with me because I figured people would ask, a little over 700 students district-wide. I think it's 746 students district-wide that qualify for free and reduced lunch. But transportation in and of itself, paid transportation, and the qualification of free and reduced lunch students it's only students kindergarten through 6th.
Right.
So beyond that, correct, beyond that, you don't have.
425, I think.
And that's
So
5
seven,
buses.
yeah, so it's district-wide, 745 students that qualify, but K to 6, there's only 420. So 420 students, realistically, all 420 students are not gonna take the bus. We know that because some of them live across the street, some of them don't live.
The budget that it cost us was 90,000. We took in 15,000 in income and fees to bring it down to 75,000. That's what it cost us last year for
So
the
again, I was
in-town.
going off the top of my head with the figures, they've been spinning in my head for weeks.
So now since we have free reduced lunch children, it seems like there's a little bit more of that now. Is there like a grant or some kind of funding from the state that you get for children that?
So transportation is probably one of the only, aside from some charter schools and vocational, the vocational school, transportation is one of the only things that you do not receive reimbursement on. So special ed transportation, unless there's a one-to-one aid on the bus for that child, we don't receive reimbursement for that. School district transportation, we do not receive any reimbursement if it was in-town school district transportation. The state doesn't pay for any of that.
What are other towns doing? I know we can't compare to Revere and Chelsea and bigger cities, Boston, but Saugus, or I don't even know.
So Saugus is Busby is, when we'll go back last year, I believe it was over $300 per student per year. Free and reduced lunch students don't pay.
Right.
And Saugus is a much larger district, so they have to put their vehicles on the road to begin with, because they have many students that live over 2 miles, so they have vehicles on the road to begin with. But they charge a very high bus fee, and it doesn't cover the total cost for the students. If you wanted to cover the total cost, we did an RFP for transportation, for in-town transportation. We sent out to Bosell, Salter, and Healy Bus. And Healy Bus was the only bus company that replied to us. And their cost just for the daily run to and from school, given the route that we have, was $154,000 per bus. Looking forward to 18, I believe that's what it was, close to that, for school year 18-19.
Would that be for also the sports after school?
No,
That-
that
That's
was
just the
only
morning.
the in-town. After-school sports is $5 per mile and $110 per waiting hour for after-school sports.
So what do you do with those kids that participate in football, hockey, what?
So we're still in discussions about whether or not we're going to continue to use the in-town, or we're going to subcontract that out in an RFP for a Healy bus service.
But that doesn't fall under the same restriction
Right.
as students going to and from school. Athletics doesn't.
What about-
So because we don't have so many students that we mandatory have to transport,
Right.
we're not in that situation. So say Saugus has 100 students that they have to transport. We only have 18 students that we have to transport that are more than 2 miles away. And we're gonna plan on using a van and a staff member to drive the van to drive those students. So
you're
that's
telling me
where we're gonna
it's not worth
save.
even those 18 people, and then kids from the maze or any other part of the town, even if you increase the fee, because right, it was 150, 175,
Right.
even if it was 300, even if you doubled it, 300, 325, I mean, that's still a good bang for
We
buck.
collect 15,000 at the fee today, right? So if you got double the number, the cost, with those people, you'd collect 30,000. Still doesn't get us to where we need to
And
be.
you still have to, if we did that, you would still have to add
An additional bus.
a minimum, I think a minimum of 2 buses if you got, of the 420 kids, if less than half of them got on that, needed that transportation or took advantage of that, you would still have to put 2 additional buses on the road at the cost of $154,000 was what came back in the RFP, $154,000 per bus. And we can't charge any money from the students to the families for those students to ride bus. They wouldn't be separate buses. Talking about just the total amount of buses you would put on the road. And if you put a minimum on there of 2 at $154,000, the school district would have to come up with over $300,000 just to put those 2 buses on the road. $300,000 additional dollars in the budget.
And it's extremely difficult finding drivers, finding bus drivers too, when you own your buses.
And those would have to,
Yeah.
those would have to be, honestly, when you start transporting that many kids, doing it with your own in-district buses, you'd also have to incorporate a fee for a full-time transportation coordinator, because there's no way a principal or the athletic director or myself could handle the safety, just the safety needs. Forget about the drivers not,
Well, I'm kind of
coming.
concerned about, I don't even know off the top of my head, but let's just say there's 100 more cars going to the Fort Bank School.
Right.
That's a safety issue.
Of course.
I mean, maybe Jimmy'd like to talk about that. We spent some time on that, and we have provided Lisa with all the suggestions that you gave us, and it's something that we're going to be discussing to see how we can work on safety issues at Fort Banks and how can we relieve some of the congestion by changing the
It is a
timing.
safety issue without a doubt, but in my opinion, go back a couple of years ago when they had that additional grade in that school, you were gonna have more cars those 2 years than you're gonna have going forward, because you had that additional grade.
But the
So-
bus was,
Right, you had the extra bus, but you take away those students, okay, so if you take away those students that went into the bus, does that offset the full grade that went in for the amount of cars that the 3rd grade students brought in? You know what I mean? So if you increased it by
a lot of people made a
120.
first grade and a third grade, so that was a one-shot deal for people too.
Yeah, but I'm gonna guess that number of cars is gonna be similar or less than
Probably.
those years.
Yeah.
So you're back to where you were 2 years ago with cars, which is difficult. We understand that's not where we wanna go, but we don't wanna lay off teachers and we don't wanna increase
No,
class
of course not.
sizes to increase this part
So
of the
that's a
budget.
good point. So when we did have that extra grade, there was the, what's it called, when the kids got to stay, the wraparound program. where they
So
got
those
to-
are some of the things
Is that
that,
something you would consider?
absolutely, and
Yeah.
the timing of the information coming out and the timing of our being able to say, okay, if this is the reality, it's sort of an overnight decision is not made about, okay, so we're gonna put in, before school programs, after school programs, we're
But
gonna
that's
reach out
something
to
you would
other vendors.
consider before
But
school
that,
program.
absolutely, that's something that Eileen Pearson and Ryan Harity and myself are working on and reaching out to our community. We have Parks and Rec, there are private vendors in the community. Today, Ms. Pearson and myself were talking about the potential of bringing people in who want to carpool and facilitating, if that is something that folks are interested in, having the school facilitate a meeting for people who are interested in that, so that everybody's sort of in the same room and can pair up and say, okay, where do you live, if that's something people are interested in. And also being able to identify through our outreach to the community, who does transportation? Are there private transportation vendors out there that we can equip our parents with information about? I think years ago, there was Rachel, and I can't remember her last name, that did, Rachel Kaplan, that did some private transportation. Talked to Parks and Rec a little bit today about whether or not they want to get into the private transportation business. If the school district has the transportation, there's that associated cost with the having to provide it to everybody. If a private vendor does it, perhaps for the same, if not less, money for families like a Parks and Rec or one of either the daycare centers or even sort of any private vendor, private Uber vendors. They don't have to comply with the same rules that we have to in terms of offering it to the total amount of students. So those are some of the things that are being discussed at the school level, and hopefully we'll be able to communicate to our parents sooner than later. But it takes time to get people together to kind of come up with some of those thoughts, and the committee has brought back to us thoughts from their PTO and PTA meetings about some of the things that parents felt would be helpful.
Yeah, I can just say I wouldn't be interested in the people taking the carpooling. That I wouldn't be interested in.
But some people
But
may.
some people may.
Some people are more comfortable with that.
I would think a before-school program would be beneficial. So, I mean, I know you have to go on, give me,
Yeah.
move along, but just if we can leave it that I know if the buses aren't an option, to please consider for the working parents a before-school program, so we can drop off the kids a little bit earlier and.
So if you remember years ago, I mean, not because your kids aren't old enough, but years ago, we did have a before-school program. I believe it was through Parks and Rec, and it was at the E.B. Newton, where if you were a working parent, you could drop your child off as early as 7 o'clock, and they were able to walk the kids across the street to the coming school at the time. And so now, a little bit of a younger population, in kindergarten, first and second, the oversight and management of some of the little ones requires more staffing. And so those are the things that we're discussing. Do we have the ability to provide it ourselves, or do we need to look towards another vendor, hopefully an in-town person? And of course, everything comes with a fee, which, you know, but if you're paying a fee for transportation, perhaps some parents are able to do that. So we're in the early stages of working with Parks and Rec to see if they have the capacity to do it on-site. And for some parents, that might be a solution, might lighten the traffic up a little bit, but there are going to be parents that are still going to be stuck, and we want to be able to have other resources for them to go to.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have any further public comment on a different issue? Because we have to move on. All right. Any delegates and visitors?
No, not this year.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the April 9th meeting?
So moved.
Motion by President Vecchia,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Fabiano. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, we do have a few warrants and payroll warrants. We have warrant SVW 18-18 in the amount of $120,000, $78.24. Payroll warrant SPW 18-19, the amount of $678, $201.54. And SPW 18-21, the amount of $683,000, $520.38. So I have a motion to approve all the warrants together.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Perrin, seconded by Mr. Fabiano. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Yeah,
Yeah, we do all at the same time.
Abstain.
And Mr. Matucci abstains. We did receive a very generous $10,000 donation from the Tonka Memorial Fund for Athletic Scholarship. I believe we do have to vote to accept that. Would you like to?
Make a
And
motion.
if I may just say that the Tank and Donovan Foundation has been extremely generous to the Winthrop Public Schools, and speaking for Matt Serino, who's our athletic director, this money is utilized to offset and provide scholarship money for students who are having difficulty paying the athletic user fee. There's a process that the parents go through. It's a confidential process where they're asked to fill out some paperwork, sort of explain their situation, and then there's a committee of people who confidentially review those and make a decision as to whether or not they're going to reduce the fee for a student or if it's going to be waived completely. And this money has enabled many of our young student athletes at various times without any level of discrimination to be able to request a fee waiver, whether it be on hard times or whether it be something that they haven't been able to pay for other reasons. And this has been extremely helpful for our student athletes to continue to play. So this is something that we are more than thankful for from the Tank and Donovan Foundation.
Mr. Perrin?
Motion to accept the donation from the Tank and Donovan Memorial Fund for Athletic Scholarships.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Swope. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Ms. Hames, if we could also send them a letter just thanking them. We'd love to do that. We do have one buildings grounds request for Winthrop for Special Olympics on May 6th. They would like to use the Fort Banks Gym, and they do have all of the proper paperwork and payment. I would like to make a motion to waive the fee.
Second.
Second by Mr. Perrin. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Mr. Fabiano abstains. Superintendent's report.
My superintendent's report is going to be a little bit thin today. I spent a good portion of today and now this evening talking about athletics and athletic transportation and school day transportation. So time well spent today. However, some of the items that I wanted to bring to your attention tonight I will save for the next meeting. But a couple of quick updates. Playground update behind the Arthur T. Cummings. The town Public Works Department has helped us out in replacing a large piece of board that went around the actual playground area that was rotted out, that we had been looking to replace for a while. It was one of the updates we were looking to get done, and so that has been done, and so it's helping us with a tripping issue so that students are not tripping over, or it was sort of an attraction to pick away at the sort of rotted wood. So I think we should be splinter-free for a little bit of time, and I'd like to thank Steve Callan and Rich Sofini for getting that done, and Mr. Fabiano for helping keep us on track with it. We also received another quote for some redoing of that playground. We've asked LT Play, I call them different each time, Utility Play, LT Play, to come out and give us an idea of what they think about the park, just to get another opinion, whether or not the surface itself needs to be completely redone, whether we can get away with utilizing and reutilizing some of the structures that are there. So I would refer that packet of information that they sent to me to, would it be Buildings and Grounds for the playground, to take a look at that, compare it to the other quotes that we received, and I've asked Mr. Harity to put together a group of people to now start to talk about if in fact, once our budget is done and we determine how much money we'll be able to dedicate to doing work on that playground, that in combination with some requests that we've made to the town, when we have all that information laid out, that we have a good plan in place and we're able to really look over what our options are. We had a scholarship committee meeting again. We're looking at doing things a little bit differently next year with all of our scholarships. I'm spending some significant time working with the scholarship committee. We have a small class, senior class this year, so we have the opportunity to really look at things closely in the process about how we determine who receives scholarships. One of the larger scholarships that we are able to give to our students is the Casella Scholarship. And so we've had several meetings on that, and this year we've been graced with another large amount of money. We're going to give $194,000 in Casella Scholarship money out, and it will be one $23,000 scholarship, one $21,000 scholarship, two $15,000 scholarships, and 12 $10,000 scholarships.
That's amazing.
And it is amazing, and our students look forward to it. On April 26th, at 7 o'clock in the morning, the students who have decided that they want to apply for that scholarship, because it is an application process, we've beefed up the notification to the parents and pushed it out through the website, letting the parents know that the scholarship is coming, to make sure that their students who are intending on applying and writing the essay do so. We write the essay during school at 7 o'clock in the morning, so not technically during school hours, but on a school day. And the students write that in school on their Chromebooks, and it's electronically submitted to the folks who score the actual essay. There are a lot of factors involved in who receives the scholarships. There are no names included.
So it's blind.
It's blind, yeah, in the essays that are sent, so folks do not know, although some of our crafty seniors sort of reveal themselves when they talk about themselves in their essay, but we try to keep that, and a lot of the people on the committee who are scoring don't actually interact with our students, so they may not know them as well. There are other facets to it. There's an income guideline, and that is through the CCS profile. So when you do your financial aid, you have to submit your financial aid through CCS. So there's really no judgment in terms of folks' financial status, but it is a bit of weight towards how the whole scholarship is scored at the end. And then the winners are announced at either class night or graduation.
determines? Who are the judges?
So there's the committee, and I don't, off the top of my head, I couldn't rattle off all the committee members' names, but the committee themselves, they all score each essay, so everybody reads the essay, and there's a whole rubric of how folks are scored for that. No, the community members, there's community members, the principal of the high school is on the committee. I don't read or score any of them, so I do sort of the final tallying of all the scores. And again, everything is done based on a number, and you don't know who the student is until the end. And once the numbers are, then everything is tallied, then the number is looked up and it correlates to a student identification.
So I guess I'm asking, how is the committee selected?
So the scholarship committee
Yeah.
is,
Appointed by the town council.
right, appointed by the town council.
Right.
Every year, folks apply to be on that committee, and then they're appointed. So that's where we're at with that. So that's exciting. Mr. Crombie and myself are working on sort of the rollout of graduation and what the rollout of scholarships are going to be like, what class night is going to look like. I'm a firm believer in making sure class night is a full class participation and full, everyone in the class has the opportunity to be recognized in some way, and comes to class night for that. So we're working on that. Budget, we had our FinCom meeting. It went well. Some questions afterwards, not a lot of questions afterwards. We presented our needs budget, and that was a true reflection of what the principals, the staff, administration, some input from the students, true reflection of what we believe we need as a school district in order to continue to make the progress that we have been making. Everything from curriculum to facilities to staffing, and lots of work gone into looking at this year's budget, last year's budget, the efficiencies that we have created in terms of some of the things that we have changed, whether it be the mentor program, whether it's aspects of special education transportation that we have changed. So really looking at all those efficiencies, looking at what we can do in the future to create more efficiencies, and then really prioritizing the direction that we want to go. And we presented that to the FinCom in a different way than they've had it before. So the principals were able to articulate what they believe is necessary in each one of their buildings and why. And we did it in a way that didn't put people to sleep, but really kind of focused in on the important elements of the budget and why we were asking for that. We were also very clear that we understand the position of the community at large, and we asked for a very lofty budget. It was not a wish budget at all. It was a needs budget. There was nothing on there that we wish we could have. Everything on there are things that we know that we need. And then when we're given our final number, we will go back and prioritize those things that we're allowed to implement at this point in time. So we did have some questions afterwards that I thought were really good questions from committee members who are not educators, who do not do what we do every day. And I think the principals knocked it out of the park in terms of their keeping the discussion and the explanation people-friendly, so that the people who were listening to us could understand, and didn't use a lot of jargon, a lot of educational jargon, to sound like we were trying to trick people. It was just a realistic reflection of what the school needs. I was proud to be a part of that group. I am always very critical of myself, so I was a little critical of my own presentation, but I thought the principals did a fine job. In terms of moving forward, I start my meetings tomorrow with the principals, my one-to-one meetings, with anticipating where I think we maybe end up in terms of what the town is able to provide us with. And so we start those discussions about prioritizing individual budgets and making sense out of what we're going to be able to do and how we can support each other if there are certain things that we cannot do in the upcoming school year. Transportation, we're continuing to evaluate athletics and what the cost for athletics will be next year. I've sort of been a little bit obsessive on it. I want to make sure that we're maximizing our money in terms of what we'll have for transportation dollars for next year, and also looking at what we can do from within with our own smaller vehicles and some of our smaller teams, and getting them to where they need to be on a daily basis. Today we had a baseball team that almost didn't get to Beverly at Danvers because once again the bus driver didn't show up, so we had no bus at 2:45. So we can't let coaches drive kids in cars, and there's lots of legal reasons why you can't do that. But thankfully, we have a flexible special ed director, and we have some special ed vehicles that were not purchased as part of a grant, which allows us to have some flexibility in terms of use. And knowing what that flexibility is and what it's not has been helpful. And we did a little bit of pre-gaming with some of our coaches to get them to get 7D licensure, so they are able to put those vehicles on the road and drive. So I know I'm using puns, but we punted at 3 o'clock today to get the baseball team there, and by the skin of our teeth, we made it out there. So still working on that. And we talked about, I was going to bring up the meetings that I'll be having with Eileen Pearson and Principal Harity around strategies that we can put in place for parents who are going to be impacted by not providing the day-to-day bus transportation. And that will include things like holding meetings for parents to attend, and putting the right people in the room and being able to talk about whether it be carpooling or whether it be after-school programs, what makes sense for some of our parents, working with community members and maybe even outside vendors who might want to use our building to be able to provide a service at a cost to parents, but to be able to use our buildings to do that, to sort of alleviate some of the traffic. We have, as you know, staggered the start time at the coming school, at the Fort Bank School for next year, and therefore there'll be a little bit of a delay in between grade 2 and kindergarten and first grade. However, if you're a parent who has a kindergartner, first grader, and second grader, maybe you're spending quite a bit of time looping, but we're hoping to alleviate that with some early drop-off and extended day program offerings once we get there. That does take some planning. Every time you think you have it right, somebody says, but if you do this, it's going to affect this. So we're trying to be mindful of all the programs in the building and the traffic as well. And that would be the end of my report. I'll go right ahead.
Two things. Jimmy and I heard a lot of parents' concerns about safety issues there, and we wrote them to you so that you have. So maybe at some future time we can discuss whatever we can do with the police, as well as perhaps walking cars or whatever,
Sure.
I think they will want to know that those are addressed, and they did say that they probably will be back to this meeting to hear what we've done.
Right.
So.
And I think in speaking with Terry Delahanty and certainly Acting Chief Goodwin, some of the areas that we may not be familiar with. I'm a firm believer in staying in your own lane and sticking to your expertise. And when it comes to traffic, I don't want to pretend to know where I need to put additional crossing guards. Not that we have crossing guards knocking down our door to work here for whatever we're paying them. I'm not really sure, but I don't think it's a lot because they're hard to get. However, using TSAC or one of the subcommittees of the town to help us determine where those spots need to be. The police department has been more than helpful in terms of them extending themselves to us. I'm not necessarily sure they have to be at the Fort Bank School every day doing that traffic. And I do hear people complaining if they don't show up. I think that was sort of a gratis that they have decided to do that. I'm sure it helps them in terms of issues that they may have. But those conversations, they're aware that the busing is ending, and we may be adding time, to the amount of traffic. So they're willing to listen.
Take it.
We are, we're going to really work with the town on that.
And one more issue. I looked at the last time we talked about the calendar, and we voted on the calendar in terms of the time, but I thought we said that we weren't voting on half days when we voted on the calendar.
Correct.
But now that the calendar came out, I think what I'm reading on this new calendar is that the Fridays remain half days if it is a parent conference day.
Correct.
And the professional days you've moved to Wednesdays.
Correct.
Good. I mean,
Correct.
I heard I got some feedback on that.
Yeah, the feedback from the staff was that the professional days everything being on a Friday sort of made Friday the day that was really a half day all the time. And so they were struggling to keep kids engaged and to struggle to keep staff engaged in the meaningful professional development on a Friday where we're asking them to sort of grasp information a lot at once in a 3-hour time frame, it's best to get them midweek and be
No,
able to
I
do that
think-
with some follow-up during the week.
I think that's a good change that you made. I
Thank you.
just wanted to note that on the
Yeah,
copy side.
thank you. That came from the staff.
Any personnel updates?
Could I ask a
Yep.
couple questions? I'm sorry. Lisa, when Mr. Harity sets up the group for the playgrounds, can I be
Yes.
the school committee
Sure, I just threw it
representative?
out, sure, I threw it out to him today, so if you want to reach out to him.
Okay.
I just threw it out to him to start to put that group together so we could start to meet, but I'm sure he'd be.
So you want me to reach out to him, or were you gonna?
I can do it.
Okay.
He's going to respond to me, I'm sure, tonight.
Okay. The other thing is with the Facella Scholarship, absolutely amazing. I think the more people that know about it, a lot of the younger families don't necessarily know about it.
Right.
It's a 4-year look at the student. It's not just that senior year. If we can get this information out to the 8th graders maybe, or even, middle school, the whole middle school, so that the parents know and they know what to look for and push their student, their child,
Towards that.
make sure they're doing their community service and athletics and involvement. It takes it all in. So
We
if we could
discussed
get it
that.
out to that middle
Right.
school, I think it would be beneficial. And it makes the parents say, wow, $194,000 went out to students. So I
committee,
think that's
that was
important that we
brought
get it out there.
That was brought up to the committee as a whole, so to be clear, the Facella Scholarship is a town scholarship, it's not a Winthrop Public Schools scholarship, it's a town scholarship, and so we talked a lot about, we have a lot of scholarships in the school that get offered. So how do you, with equity, talk about one scholarship versus another? So the Rona Mail Scholarship versus the Facella Scholarship versus, an inside the school scholarship, and give due diligence to each one of those. So those scholarships that are town scholarships, what we came up with was that there was going to be a connection or a link between the website on the school's website to the town's website so that it could be totally laid out. And that when we discuss scholarships with our incoming 8th graders, our incoming 9th graders during the 8th grade, that the parents are made aware of that and all of the other scholarship opportunities. Communication now with our new website is a little bit better, and being able to link the town's website to the school's website. And again, you want to give each scholarship equity, so we don't want to overshoot one scholarship versus another. And I don't make those decisions, that's because it's not a school scholarship, the committee itself.
I was on that when the Facellas first came on, that's the scholarship committee,
Yep.
and we understood that this is something special.
Yeah.
And when somebody donates over $6 million to the town
For
for this
sure.
type of scholarship, I think the other scholarships understand that, they're gonna get a little bit more press than
Right.
a lot of the
So
other
the
ones.
committee itself has agreed from the town side to publicize it more than it has in the past, and not rely just on the school to publicize it, but that the town should also be having that link for our parents.
Definitely.
Personnel updates?
So personnel updates, we have some cafeteria worker positions, and they are a 5.5-hour kitchen worker at the middle high school. We have a posting for a substitute kitchen worker for an on-call substitute kitchen worker for all of our schools, and then an assistant to the lead cook in the cafeteria as a 6-hour position. And those are the only posted positions we have at this time.
All right.
I'd like to make a motion that we waive the first reading of the social media policy.
Second.
Second by Ms. Powell. Further discussion?
I actually had a discussion on the policy itself.
Okay.
Okay.
Just a quick question, are we being a little vague when we were putting teachers and not staff in the policy? So it's saying teachers may not friend or follow current students, whether
wanna include
it's
staff.
custodians or, administration. Are we leaving out a group of people by saying just teachers?
It was not our intention to leave anybody out.
Right, so that's,
Yes, we can.
should we
Can
change
we
the
modify
wording
that
on that?
Could modify the word.
Just when it
Right.
says just teachers, it just,
Yeah, no, we were,
So what about the word employees?
or staff.
School.
I think we were working for the model policy.
Yeah, in the model policy. So we were that's it. And they were always talking about teachers, but yes, it should be, I think, I agree with you that it should be extended to include all the staff. So did you say teachers and staff?
I'm not good at that stuff, the exact wording of it, but
With their
it
public
just,
schools employees. maybe.
Employees.
So that also includes coaches then too?
everybody, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Volunteers.
Do we make a motion on that?
yeah, make a motion.
All right, I'll
to-
make a motion to amend the proposed regulation to say that employees of Winthrop schools, that it applies to all of them, not,
So anywhere it says teachers, we'll replace it with that.
correct.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Powell, second by Ms. Swope. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. Moving on.
I'm sorry, you just take a, you had a motion to waive the first reading in a second.
Motion to waive the first reading of the social media policy. The second is withdrawn, actually.
So who made it?
It was, the motion was by Mr. Perrin, and it was
Yes.
second by Ms.
So
Powell.
withdraw.
And,
I withdraw.
Okay.
Moving on, do we have any public comments? Or none? Public relations, Mr. Masucci,
All set.
Fabiano?
Just a few things. On Wednesday, weather permitting, it's gonna be our first home track meet. I heard it's gonna rain, I hope it doesn't rain it out, but
Doesn't either.
I certainly can't wait to go down there and watch that happen. It's been a long time. And also, Winnock has their big fundraiser this Sunday at 11 o'clock at Deer Island, $20 per person. We raise money to Special Olympics, bowling, Winnock on the road, a lot of good programs. We'd love to see you down there.
Not the track meet, just Mrs. McGee, former track coach, will be recognized by the captains of the
Nice.
team. And she's been contacted to come down. And so we're praying for no rain, but we'll have to change that.
Mr. Perrin?
Nothing for me.
Ms. Powell?
Yes, the middle school drama department will be hosting Drama Fest, the METG Drama Festival. They'll have several schools coming to our school to participate in this competition. Our drama program is on at 1 o'clock. That is open to the public. It's $10 and you can go to all of the shows. That'll be an all day.
And they're fabulous.
Yes.
Swope?
Yeah, I was interested to see in the legislative bulletin that I guess circuit breaker is going to be funded at 75%. Is that true?
So last check, it was not funded at 75%, it was funded at 72%. And as someone who sits on the committee for the state to oversee special education, we have really been pushing for it to be 75%. I don't know what the date is on that one.
April 11th?
So as of April 11th, I believe they had still been sitting at 72. If they've come up to 75, and I don't know about it, I'm gonna be mad, but I think that was their goal, was to get to 75. Are you seeing it there at 75?
No, there's-
Nice,
there's a-
I'd be happy.
There's a bill trying to get it 75.
So I didn't know that bill had
It
gone
hasn't-
through.
It hasn't gone through.
Right, it hasn't passed, right? But I'm gonna read this, because if it passed, then I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's good news,
Yeah.
at least they're talking about it, so.
75% would be great, 100% and change in the foundation formula calculation would be even better, but I don't know that we'll see that in my lifetime.
And we're at 75% now, correct?
72.
So I have to look to see what
Oh,
we
no,
were
70%.
last year. I think we dropped to 68%. I think, I'd have to go back and look, Mr. Fabiano, I'm not 100% being out of it for a year. It's one thing I didn't have to check. But it's a significant amount, the percentage rate change is a significant amount of money.
Mm.
And oftentimes what happens is the percentage rate will go up and the foundation amount also goes up, so it sort of means nothing because you can actually be at a loss. So my goal would be for the foundation amount or the foundation calculation to change in the opposite direction and for the circuit breaker reimbursement to go up, which would give us more money. They're very good at playing games with percentage rates and foundation. Going down is never good, but we would like it to be fully funded at 100%, which is what they told us 13 years ago when this began.
And the ultimate goal is to have every student stay here anyways, so,
That's the ultimate goal.
right?
Yeah.
And another question just on that bulletin, and so maybe you can clarify that for me. I see that would we be getting any additional transportation money for special needs students based upon that other comment up there on the right side,
No,
which
so that-
says something about, but it's regional
Right, that's regional
transportation.
transportation, like Northeast Regional Vocational School, Essex Aggie. There's a level of reimbursement for
I see. Okay.
charter schools and regional schools. Special ed transportation, not anything.
I was just thinking if we had to send someone out of district, I thought perhaps that would be something.
Right,
that we
no,
could-
but that is one of the larger pushes across the state from special ed directors in the entire Commonwealth is to get some reimbursement on special ed transportation. That's a fight that's been in existence for about 20 years. Hasn't moved.
President Vecchia? All right, motion to adjourn by Mr. Matucci, seconded by President Vecchia. All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions? Guys have it.